All right, so welcome to Live Your Story. Before we begin, I'd like to invite everybody to indulge us in a fun activity. I want you to, since there's a few of us here, feel free to come off mic or use the chat if you prefer that, and drop your name, your organization, and which one of these images you most identify with today and why. Okay, so you can take a few seconds and come off mute or drop it in the chat, whatever you're comfortable with.
My name is Coach Carmen.
Yeah.
Name of organization is Mission Accomplished Transition Services in the city of Albany. Number 3 is like a unique cuteness. So I'm gonna go with that because it just snowed yesterday, which is crazy. But I'm gonna go with that. I don't know the name of that animal, but it looks like it has a little swag. I feel like I got a little swag. So I'm gonna go with number 3.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. I relate to that. I'm in the Campbell region as well. And we had a miracle drift. It just came and left and everything was covered. And by the end of the day, we were out strolling and patrolling. So I connected 3 as well. Thank you. Thank you, Coach Carmen. Anyone else?
Okay, this is Rev Deli, but I don't see 3 images. I'm on my phone. Is that why?
There are 5 images, but are you looking at the presented screen? Like if you scroll to the left?
I'm scrolling and I see other people, but I don't see any additional images.
Gotcha. I know when I'm on my phone, I can swipe in the different directions and all the way to the left.
Oh, to the left. Oh, gotcha. All right. Okay, so I'm Rev Deli. I'm in the Hudson Valley. I think pronouns she and her. Soil and Souls is the organization. And I like, oh gosh, is that a baboon? Oh my God. I was gonna do number 1, but I'm going with number 3.
Oh, okay.
Is that what that is?
I don't know. I don't know. What makes you choose 3?
Well, because they ain't taking no prisoners. That's why. It's
Okay.
serious.
Gotcha.
It's moving forward. It's positive. It's
Yeah.
positive. It's like nothing is going to stop me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. We've got one in the
That's
chat.
it.
Thank you. Appreciate you. Appreciate you. We've got one in the chat from Michael Del Rio, the farm school. What's going on? And he's feeling the sloths. They look so cozy. So number 2. Yeah, these winds are cold and, sometimes we just want to get cozy. I get that completely. All right, excellent. Anyone else would like to share? As I said, it's completely okay if you don't want to drop it in the chat, unmute yourself.
I can go. I'm Christina Garcia and I'm at the farm school with Michael. And I'm feeling number 4, I think, like seeing an abundance of projects and like things going on and like a little bit of a don't know which one to choose. I can resonate with that. Lots going on.
Yeah, lots of opportunities. Hard to navigate. Sometimes we just jump in the case with all the opportunities. So we just stay right there. All right, appreciate you, Christina. Thank you. All right, any final takers?
Hey everybody, I'm Carolyn Edsel-Vetter. I'm also at the Co-op Fund of the Northeast, and I am number 1 cat shark because I am trying to remain warm and available while also wearing my little fuzzy layer of protection.
Excellent, excellent. Cat shark. Yeah, cat shark is super cute. All right, everybody, thank you for indulging that. It's coming into the space with a little bit of humor. And let's dive into a few of the larger issues. So as we mentioned, we are the Cooperative Fund of the Northeast, and we're a nonprofit community development financial institution. And we're interested in creating an opportunity for everyone to experience economic justice through the use of cooperative enterprises. So we provide co-op-friendly financial products throughout the Northeast of the United States. That's New England and New York, and a few adjacent states. We also provide business coaching, connections, and content to folks who want to create cooperative enterprises or who want to grow or maintain their cooperative enterprises. And we serve as an investment opportunity for socially conscious investors. So that's a lot of what the organization is about. And today's session is about 90 minutes. You can expect us to review 3 different storytelling frameworks. And it's going to be an opportunity for you to reflect on your experiences. And anything shared here, if we have folks brave enough to share, stays here. That's the ask that I'm making, and I think we can all make of each other so that we can feel comfortable sharing our stories and learning from each other. All right, everyone cool with that? I'm gonna have to assume that's a yes. Unless you're not cool with it, then say so. All right, today's learning agenda. Excellent, Rev Daly. How do you go from telling your story to living your story? And I think this is really important in today's climate because there's so much wordplay, there's so much utilizing of buzzwords and words that we know are going to work, but how many folks are able to walk that talk, as Diane or Dionne Warwick said? And so that's really our learning agenda. If you've got things that you want to particularly take away from this session or would like to ask, feel free to drop it in the chat and we'll engage and weave it into the content that we're going to present today. Okay, so if you've got something in particular that you'd like to take away from this, feel free to drop it in the chat. Okay, and as it's relevant, I'll try to speak to it. So before you can live your story, you have to tell your story. And there are lots of ways to do so. Some people speak from the heart, but our minds are wired for stories. And there's a way that we typically can introduce our story. And we come into the space understanding that we're gonna gather everyone's attention and introduce this story. And second, we wanna then draw attention to a problem, to something that we're interested in solving, something that we're experiencing that's painful. And then we wanna articulate a solution to that story, right? And then we create an outro that rounds it out before making our call to action. And so this is a basic storytelling formula that you can use for any type of message. It could be on social media, it could be in your newsletter, it could be on your website, it could be orientation to team members, right? You're thinking intro. How do I communicate the intro, right? And that's, as I said before, the scroll stopper, right? We want to think about an emotional hook. Oftentimes, this is tied to identity. You might see something like, if you're a creative entrepreneur, then something, right? If, you know, traveling overseas sucks, right? Something emotional to really get folks into it. And it sucks because you got to get a visa. You got to learn how to, you know, identify signs in the new language, whatever it is. And you couple that with the solution in a way that speaks to the pain, okay? And then we have our outro and our call to action. In other words, how do you inform the audience that you're speaking to of what they can do to change things, this pain that they feel, right? Traveling sucks, it takes so long to get a visa, you have to learn new languages. What can this person do to change things? And that's usually how we see brands package their products and services. And so before we get going in living the story and talking about those details beyond telling the story, I'd like to invite you guys to tell your story. And I'd like us to take 5 minutes to write down our story of our co-op or organization, or even of our personal journeys into creating a co-op using this framework. So I want you to try it. some of you may be familiar with this general framework. As I said, it's very kind of the core elements here. So I want to give us 5 minutes to take time to ourselves, grab a paper or pull up a screen, a Google Doc, and just write your story according to this framework. Okay. So I'm going to give you guys, 3 to 5 minutes here, and then we'll check back in. Excellent. So not sure how far people have made it. I saw a question in the chat. What's the outro? Sorry for not addressing it earlier, Michael, but it basically rounds out the story, right? So if we start at traveling sucks, or if you're creative, or do you need funding? At the end, find funding here. Creatives can unite in this way. Make traveling not suck. It's a complete retelling of the initial point, and it just tries to end the story on the happy ending piece, and then it's up to the audience to take it from there. So the outro is like your happy ever after that you're trying to bring in after you've discussed the solution. Excellent. So given that we have a small group, I think we can stay in this room and allow folks to share if they felt comfortable. Does anyone feel comfortable sharing what they have? And it's completely okay if it's unfinished. We've got some hesitancy. I think that's okay. Perhaps, go ahead, Mike.
I would like to share, definitely my story is not complete, and especially I'm also just a year into our organization, and I don't feel like I'm necessarily telling our story for Holly, but this is kind of a little bit of it. So the farm school is a farm, and we are, so I just was thinking of this quote from Leah Penniman and her book, Farming While Black, which says that revolution is based on land, and land is the basis of all liberation, independence. So in order for all of us to be free, we must connect to some land. And especially in the United States, a lot of indigenous people and many others have been disconnected, especially to their lands, and all of us in the process. So for all of us to be free, we must connect to the land. And some of the things that we do is that we're working on making those connections. And that's where, as far as kind of I got. But yeah.
That's great. That's great. You used something that was emotionally appealing to you, liberation on land, to talk about why that's important. Folks have been disconnected, and brought it into a space that was relevant to what you're doing, and you kind of closed it out. Now, what can I do for you as someone who's seen this message at a bus stop, on your website, at a pitch that you're making? How can I change things?
Well, I think I would encourage you yourself to find that connection, for you to find the land that you might be connected to. And if you can't find it, the farm is also a place where we are open for everyone to come and connect to the land in some way. And in that process also connect with themselves, so then they can also, you can then also find that connection yourself.
Definitely.
So you can always come. We have no gates.
Exactly. I was gonna say, it's come to the farm, right? Right. It's book your visit now on the website. It's click here to schedule a visit. It's come to our farm. Here's the address, right? Wherever you are, the context of this message, there has to be an action point, right? Whether it's digital or analog. And you want to be able to effectively say, which is what I'm hearing, come to our farm, right? We'll help you connect with yourself. We'll help you connect with the land, and you can take your own journey in community on the land, you know? So I think don't shy away from that. Invite people to the farm, right? You want people to come, right?
Right, yeah.
Yep. And then that's where the next piece start, right? That's where the living starts, right? Because if we're saying we're connecting people, now what are all the experiences folks are gonna have when they come to that land? And how does each of those experiences leave that person with the sense that they were helped in identifying their own connection to land and can take it with them, you know? And you can map out each one of those interactions that someone's going to have with a member or staff or volunteer, and help that person realize they have to convey that this person is trying to connect to something, right? And so that's kind of just getting to the beginnings of living the story, which is always beyond marketing. But first we have to give them something to do. So once you give them something to do, then they're going to hopefully do it. Now what? Okay. We want to think about all the interactions they're going to have and start shaping those. Appreciate you, Michael. Anybody else?
I didn't do the whole story, but just hearing the call to action conversation, we don't, aside from calling on people to apply to participate in our programs, we don't have any other call to action. So this is giving me something to think about, where we can maybe have information sessions once a month or twice a month for people to learn about what it is that we do, and how it would benefit them.
Definitely. And sometimes it's not even a big thing. It's really about taking the next step.
Right.
If you've laid out that emotional hook, that scroll stopper, right? I was kind of developing a proposal around creating cooperative ecosystems. And my first liner is, Black people don't do co-ops, right? And so that's a lie. How do we deal with that, right? This false narrative have created all these conditions. So I'm trying to get them to stop. And the first thing, sign up for our newsletter or join the community, right? Click this link. And so it's just that next step to create the sense that they're about to embark on an adventure. And it really could be attend this info session, download this PDF, put your email in here, you know, depending on the context that you're spreading the message within. You want to just think, what's the next thing they can do pertaining to the solution you've proposed. So definitely could be info session, but it could also be give us your email. So thank you. Any other thoughts? Rev Dele, were you about to get in there? Okay, I thought I saw her unmute. Excellent. So no problem. I think sometimes we're not comfortable sharing our stories, and you know, that creates the opportunity to not move forward. Definitely.
I struggle with when it comes to the emotional hook, I struggle with not talking too much. You know, so it's like, I don't know. And for everyone on the line, so what we do at Mission Accomplished is provide career education for young professionals and entrepreneurs between the ages of 13 to 35 who are in the fashion, construction, interior design / decorating and mural painting industry / career paths. So I don't know. So I don't know what the emotional hook is. I know, like, as far as the problem and the solution is concerned, you know, from our vantage point when it comes to the problem, it's young professionals and entrepreneurs really understanding the business behind the industry, like how to develop a brand for yourself as a person within an industry, while also knowing how to develop a brand for a business or for a department, and also learning about the financial responsibilities, budgeting, accounting, and then marketing and public speaking, right? So people getting comfortable and having a basic understanding of those areas in order to show up as more than just a person that's able to execute the responsibilities that are within a job description if they're working for a company, or if they're a business owner, being able to show up and show their client that they know how to run a business and know how to truly be a solution to their client's problem. But the emotional hook to like career education, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I think there are shortcuts, I would say, but they're not going to get us the full way. And that's one shortcut I can say is anger, right? What is frustrating about the experience the person you're trying to engage is experiencing? You know, what's really frustrating about that? And a lot of that emotional hook, that scroll stopper, is just about getting your audience to understand that you're identifying with them. And so that's why you're seeing a lot, oh, if you're creative, if you're an entrepreneur, you know, do you have an issue with this? It's really about understanding what's painful about the experience that your audience is having and using that to drive the conversation. So what's really frustrating for who's dealing with this issue, and really understanding the emotional connection they have to that, either to their identity or to just something really frustrating, is a good way to start. It doesn't have to be incendiary, but it does need to show that you understand their pain. And so that could be a one sentence line that shows, you know, I'm in this with you. Are you of this type of person? Because I'm that type of person, right? If it shows that you're speaking to them. Absolutely. Anybody else before we keep rocking?
I was just going to say hello. I apologize for coming in late, and I'm between things, so I was off camera for a little bit. I'm appreciating the conversation so far. Really, it's been inspiring. So I was writing really quickly. I can kind of share what kind of bubbled up, but I know it'll
Absolutely.
certainly have to be massaged. And so at the Wellness Cooperative, right here in Boston, Roxbury based, and I'll just kind of share what I wrote and then kind of go into it. I really appreciated the emotional hook piece. I was trying to think about that. So I just started with, our health is not socially determined. As members of BIPOC communities, we are aware of the social influences on our health, but together we can determine and achieve our whole wellness. Systems of health are not about healthcare, but more about disease care. And at the Wellness Collaborative, we approach and engage wellness with an interdisciplinary approach using our 7 disciplines of wellness. We know that when we co-create individually, relationally, and community-wise, we are more well. Come join us as we gather to give and give it to grow, which is our motto. I was ending there. So it's probably too many words, but I was trying to start with that. You know, everyone hears the social determinants of health, and that's one of our core beliefs, is that nothing is fully determined. They're certainly influenced, but they're not determined. And so I wanted to start there with, and I probably have to work on the phrasing, but that was the energy behind it. So would love any feedback.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think you did a good job, you know, breaking it down into these pieces. And then you said, come join us, right? So depending on the context, what does that mean, right? Is it in person? Is it a sign-up sheet? Is it online? Is it give us your email? Is it online? Is, you know, on your website? Subscribe to our newsletter. You know, what does join us mean? Really refine that. And then to get to the top of the story, the emotional hook is for the intended audience, right? And you're going to have many audiences. You may have an audience of members, You may have an audience of customers who are not members. You may have an audience of funders, right? If you had some version of a, charitable model. And you may also have an audience of employees. And so you have to think about each one of these audiences and what is their relationship to the problem. Speak to their identity. Who are they, right? These various audiences, and really understand what pain they're dealing with. And you might customize that message according to each one of those. So the first thing you want to do, especially when you're telling a story, is know the audience, right? Who are the various audiences that we might engage? Write them down. What are their pain points, right, on their way to achieving their goals? And those pain points can give you an insight into what's the appropriate emotional hook for them, right? For funders, could be unresponsive, individuals in the community who want to provide access to health services to, right? Tired of not finding whatever. To workers, it's finding a purpose maybe in helping their community. To members, it's being so on and so forth. And so thinking about each individual audience member and what goals they have and the pain they experience trying to achieve those goals. So those three things, who are they, what are they trying to do, and what's painful about trying to achieve what they're trying to do, is a simple way to kind of get better at the customer discovery.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Rev, were you trying to get in there?
Yeah, I was trying to get in there. I'm trying to stay on camera.
No problem. Do what you can. It's okay.
It work. Okay, so this this session is showing me we need to update our story. So this is like the first time I've in this updated story. Okay.
Okay.
But my one of the hooks I like to use is redeeming our souls requires that we redeem the soil. It's only when we bring our hands into the soil and experience the richness that Mother Earth gives us that we are able to reconnect to our community, to ourselves, and to our Creator. Soil and Souls has been providing training for leaders for the last few years up and down the Eastern Seaboard. And we discovered that until we heal ourselves, we can't lead ourselves. And so we're looking for a piece of property on which we can secure our indigenous growing practices, and where we can secure our healing retreats, and where we can secure our business model, our native and medicinal plant nursery. So I've stopped there. So the ask for this is, we're in the middle. We just received $25,000 to secure our property, and so we are asking people to join into that land acquisition so that we can be sovereign over our land, and as well as being sovereign over our healing and our businesses.
Gotcha.
No, I'm all over the place. It's just,
No, you didn't stop. You're a beautiful storyteller. I've always loved that about my interactions with you. And I think that's a beautiful story, right? What we're looking at are the specific acts that's possible, right? You think of the various audiences and what you can ask them for. So for some folks, it's come to the website, learn more. Some folks is, sign up to volunteer. Some folks is check out our crowdfunding page right here, right? So having that ready and tailored to each type of people that you want. You want volunteers on the line, you want leaders to enroll in the programs, and you're going to want funders or individuals to become funders. So think of those three asks, have them very clear. I would say the problem, for me, it's a beautiful story, but the problem isn't bold enough or clear enough, and the problem comes later, right? But when we talk about redeeming the land, we have to introduce the disconnection. We've been disconnected, and why maybe, but either way, your solution speaks to that disconnection, right? You just mentioned it a little later. So I would bring that up, second line, and think about after that redemption story, only way we're going to redeem ourselves is to redeem the soil. Powerful, right? But who's it speaking to? It might speak to someone with a land-centered experience or a spiritual perspective. And so you want to think about, who else are we talking to who might not necessarily connect to the language of redeeming, right? It might be the case that we need to save our soil so we can save ourselves. And for too long, Black people, Indigenous folks have been disconnected from the land, right? At Soil and Souls, we're training leaders to be stewards of the land. And in order to save our soil or redeem our soil, we're calling you to join our community. Check out this online page where you can be a donor, or click here to learn more. Click here, you know, it depends on the context. In person, it might just be a meeting. Come and talk to me. Let's have a meeting next Wednesday. You want to think of your ask, no matter the context, from in person to digital to, you know, whatever else, the actual product itself. Hope that's helpful. So everybody who wanted to share, I think that's good. Any other thoughts there?
No, that's good. That works. You've given me too many assignments, so it's all good.
Perfect. So in reflecting, right, what stories are you telling? When you think about the process that you just went through to write this story down, what stories are you telling? Whether in this context or prior to this, you know, who are they about, right? Where, how, and why are you telling these stories? These are really important questions to help you think through what stories you need to be telling. How do you center the folks that you're talking to as central characters in the story? Because a lot of times we're telling our story, but we're not giving our story to the opportunity for someone to take our story, right? We want to tell our story and it's very personal, but the audience that we're telling the story to, it's really personal for them. So how do we help them become central characters in the story that we're telling? And it's something that is difficult to conceive of because the story is so personal, right? It's really, we think about us, but when we're telling the story to an audience, it's really about them and how they fit into this. And so that's really key. And then you think of all the various contexts, as I said, right? Is it on your website? Is it coming through an email? Is it on your social media? Is it coming through a newsletter? Are you doing an in-person pitch? Where are all the places you're telling that story? And that can allow you to change the format, right? It could be long, could be short, whatever the case is. And so you'll know why based on who you're talking to. So I want you to assess all of the places that you're telling the story, right? Make a list, again, website, newsletter, social media, all the different places. Where am I going and pitching, right? Because we're kind of always pitching, whether we know it or not, but where am I telling this story? Who am I telling it to? And how am I telling it? That'll be some additional homework for Rev, and even an opportunity to reflect. And after you answer these questions, not even after, right now, as we're talking about this, how does it feel to tell your story? How does it feel, right? So anyone could talk right now. How did you feel telling your story? And anybody, you can drop it in the chat, you can come off mute. Gotta get one of you. Even if you're not comfortable sharing how you felt now, that's okay. But you might have felt nervous. You might have felt like you're not doing it justice. You might feel confident, right? Whatever that feeling is, pay attention to that. And then check into the folks you're telling the story. How does it feel to hear the story, right? That's gonna help you to think about the real crucial experience here, which is how you feel after hearing that story, right? And you wanna believe the story you're telling. If you don't feel good telling that story, maybe you don't believe it, right? You might be not confident about your words, which is a separate issue, but do you believe the story you're telling? How you feel telling that story is transmissible. And so you want to tell a story you're believing. Okay, that's the importance of that question. How do you feel while telling your story? And you really want to understand, why am I feeling this way or that way? Okay, so then you can check in with other folks. How did they feel hearing the story? Okay, so that's some good homework. To just find 3 to 5 people that you can tell a story to, see how you feel, and get their perspective as to how they felt. Feelings here. We're going for the emotional hook. Okay.
Hey, Johan, can I raise a question?
Absolutely.
The group of folks that we have here, there's a lot of folks who are not necessarily in a worker co-op setting, but more in a nonprofit setting. And I know sometimes one of the challenges is about that, whose stories are you telling? And, you know, when we're talking from a worker co-op perspective, usually we're telling our own stories, but sometimes in a nonprofit perspective, maybe we're not, or maybe it's, you know, we have some things in common with our constituents, but not totally. And what would you say to folks about that issue of kind of like authority and permission and honesty and whatever?
Yeah, that's a really important question if you're in the nonprofit space, because essentially you're harvesting the stories of the people you've served, sharing those stories with funders, and you're rewarded for how you're able to articulate the stories, which is why we see a perpetuation of victimhood and, you know, that type of negative narrative. And so the question is, how do you get consent? And then if you ask that question, the next question is, can I even get consent from this person who is out there needing this service that I provide? Of course, they're going to say yes if they've gotten something. So what really is the capacity to consent is a really important question. And you need to make sure that that person is telling their story, but not in a way where they're engaged in the pageantry of your needs, meaning you're putting them on stage to try to empower them, but they're still serving you. You know, what are they getting out of it other than the fact that they've had help and they're willing to tell, you know, to essentially promulgate how important this service was in their life. The capacity to consent is really important, and I would question it constantly as you're trying to tell the stories of the folks you've served, right? Think about how sharing their story serves them, in other words, and that can get you closer to a more equitable relationship. So I would say very difficult for nonprofits to walk that line today, knowing what we kind of know now, at least what I hope we're all getting to understand about consent and the relationship that someone who's being helped by an organization, you know, what position are they really in? Any other thoughts there? You can definitely go deeper.
I was just going to jump in because we're somewhat certainly of a hybrid. You know, we're kind of this forest bias. So every, you know, the leadership, the founders, we are the community we're serving. It's us. So our story, our reason, our passion in it is because we're talking about ourselves, and it's not this kind of top-down patriarchy of, you know, the savior coming nonprofit. Oh, it's kind of disrupting some of those narratives, and so. It's very relationship based, it's very narrative based, and it is very interpersonal and truly co-creative. So there isn't anything that we are putting forward that isn't done with, by, and for our community. And we are the community. So with that kind of those false fragments, that separation pieces is not even how we're kind of oriented in the space. And I'm realizing, and I really appreciated those comments, is that that's so much a part of our narrative and our story. Oftentimes when we're in front of folks, it's telling, you know, trying to tell people what we're not. Like, no, we're not a wellness center. No, we don't provide services too. No, we're not, you know. So as an educational nonprofit, we are co-creating programming with our community, coming from the community about these are the things that we care about. You know, so being in the collective, working with urban farmers, working with artists, working with epidemiologists, working with business owners. It's this very interdisciplinary space. So this has been useful to think about how are we in a very concise way capturing that, you know, kind of what we're not, and kind of this new space. We're very kind of upending these kind of notions and structures that have been, I think, part of the problem that has impeded our wellness, our well-being. So we're not trying to operate within the system. We're literally trying to create a new narrative about what does it mean to be well. And we know that we do that. We really are better together when we are thinking, learning, creating together. That helps to inform our well-being. So as opposed to we're providing services to, we're co-creating with. And so that's all been something we're just kind of trying to figure out and work out in this space. So I appreciated that last comment because it's very much like a co-op as a nonprofit, so.
Yeah, there's definitely ways to eliminate the need to harvest the story later on by working with them to till the soil in the beginning, to have everyone a part of the team whose story we're telling reduces that potential for harm, I think. And I think trying to be regenerative, for lack of a better word, and in that when they're telling their stories, it's rebuilding a capacity in them. It is not disabling them in any way or perpetuating a framework of victimhood. To flip it on its head, it would be survivorship or something that allows them to feel stronger by telling their stories, no matter what point in the story they're coming in. How do you allow folks to tell their stories, or how do you help tell the stories of people who maybe don't have a loud voices that you have in a way that's regenerative? It paints the problem, but it does not allow them to be seen disabled or seen in a disabled capacity. So excellent. Let's keep rocking. So I think as you're telling the story of your co-op, a few quick tips to remember is simple and fast. Okay, it's not necessarily the case that you have everyone's attention today for a minute, 10 minutes, longer than that. You want to be able to convey what you have to say quickly, because if you confuse them, you lose them. Okay, especially online, whether it comes to your website, when it comes to social media, when it comes to email blasts, you want to get that main point, as I was advising Rep. Dele to do. Get that problem to the top, to that second sentence. Don't bury it in beautiful language or even facts or data. Really just get the problem out there. Rule of threes. This is something that's a little bit sideways, but it's really important to remember that not packaging things in 5s, 10s, and many other things. Keep your points 3 and under. And we can see evidence of this. So there's 3 little pigs, right? We haven't heard that story in 20, 30 years, but remember it, right? 3 blind mice is just part of being in a 3-dimensional reality. It's kind of this kind of pseudoscientific situation, but it's true. It's true. So if you can keep things in 3s, it'll aid memorability. And then shareability. The most important thing about telling your story is, will someone share your story, all right? Because when someone sees something online, in social media, whatever, they might like it, right? That's like saying, okay, cool. But when they share the story, they're saying this reflects me. They're saying me sharing this makes me look cool. Does sharing your story help them look cool, right? So that is kind of the ultimate power of the story. Will someone else claim it and share it in order to reflect themselves? Let's keep going. I want to introduce our second framework. Again, our first framework is a nice basic one. It's just about the story. This is called the 4 truths. And this is more of a multidimensional approach. This is where you can start to bring the context of your story into the context of your organization, or the content of your story into the context of your organization. And so it looks at 4 key areas, and it's trying to get to the truth of these 4 key areas. It's trying to get to the truth of who you are, right? What are your unique capabilities, unique attributes, unique culture? You think about the organization and you try to think, what do we reward? What are we good at? What is important about us that is not necessarily important about everyone else, right? What is really happening with us right now, right? What is unique to us? And you think about the audience. Again, you will have to delineate each different audience that you might speak to, from funders to members to employees to customers, right? 4 basic ones. and you might have subgroups within that, like a board of directors, but you think about each of those different audiences and what are their challenges that they're facing right now, right? Who are they and how do we help them address those challenges to advance their story, right? And how does that in turn affect how they advance our story? So thinking about the people we're speaking to, their challenges and how we advance their story. Then you get to the moment. This is the moment in time. This is understanding the cultural context, right? What is the stories being talked about in the moment in time, in the media, in the local news, online, as people interact around an issue? What's the technological context, right? How are people actually navigating things, right? So, 2020, we're dealing with COVID and we're dealing with Zoom, and the business context is, delayed, slow. We're thinking about what are the contexts around this moment in time. Cultural context largely in the area, technological context as far as how people are working together to solve problems, and the business context as far as how resources are flowing. What's going on right now, larger than you, right? You can do an iceberg analysis here. You can do many different types of analyses. And then mission, what will we achieve, right? This is your organizational mission, stated or otherwise. This is the greater purpose, the quest that we're on, and the results. In other words, what's the vision, what's the mission, and what are the success metrics, right? How do we know that we'll be successful? And so these 4 dimensions allow you to create a broader sense of the story and allow you to then bring the story into your actual activities, okay? And I'll go in more detail, but once you start getting the truth of each of these, right? The truth about ourselves. What's our truth right now, right? What's our unique capabilities? What's our unique situation right now? What's the truth of the participant or the audience, right? What's their truth right now? What's their challenges and what are they doing to advance their story? How do they advance our story? The moment in time. What's the truth of the moment in time right now? And what's the mission, right? So you think about all 4 things and you create a little statement for each of them. And that allows a meta story to emerge. Now, you can do pretty straightforward and common sense analyses, but a skillful facilitator can also help you to get to hone into the words if you're having trouble with that. But it's there, it's not complex. There's just a lot of different tools you can interact with to get to the truth of who we are, right? You can start with a SWOT analysis for who you are. You can think about the things that we're doing well and we rewarded and recognized for. And you can think about the people you're serving, and you can do just quick interviews with them. Tell us a little bit about the challenges you're facing in regard to our subject area for each of the different participants or audiences. You want to look at the news cycle. You want to look at what people are talking about online, hashtags. You can even just think about what was the last couple of conversations you had outside of work and think about the moment in time. And ultimately the mission is what you've probably already articulated on your website. Like, what are we trying to do? And so once you are in a position to have each of those statements, right, you start thinking about a way to tell that story and connect them. So an example is, if we are a company that is blank, right, the protagonist phase, talking to people who are the audience phrase, at a moment in time that is the moment phrase, we will complete our mission of blank when something happens. And you leave that blank and you sit with it, but you get to the 4 truths and I likely will see something emerge. And so I'll give you an example. And I've done this a few different times. I was working with this housing agency on strategic planning. And this was a lot of different leaders, right? This is emerging leaders, Black lawyers. This is old white money, preachers, all types of folks are coming together to create this housing organization. And the truth was that people were missing meetings. People weren't that responsive. They couldn't really be sure if everyone's going to show up to each of the planning sessions. But each one of these individuals were very dedicated to the idea of affordable housing, right? The preacher, he's dedicated in his way. The lawyer, she lives in that community, she just bought a house. You know, all these people had some dedication to housing, yet they were disengaged from the organization. And so the truth of their moment is they had dedicated people who were disengaged from the organization. And then when it came to the audiences, they were not doing grant reports, right? They did not have an idea of how customers were interacting with the services. Their staff really didn't have any evaluation systems, right? And so it was like, have we met? Right? It was just, do we know these people? The people who are giving us money, the people who we're supposed to be serving our staff. So have we met? And it was during COVID, so everyone was going home. So this is a housing organization that's dealing with everyone being stuck at home. And so, you know, everyone's going home and they're dealing with unrest. It was kind of like going to hell home. Sorry, it's the hell. But it was pretty bad. People were leaving and just going home. And their mission was to promote neighborhood housing. So the idea is, if we are an organization of leaders who are dedicated yet disengaged, who are talking to people that we're not formally introduced with, we don't know them well, and they're all stuck in their houses, they're going home, then we're going to achieve our mission of promoting neighborhood housing when, and this emerged, we serve our neighbors. And I just use this image of Wilson from Home Improvement, I think that's his name, because he was always peeking over, being helpful, but we didn't know who he was. And so this was reflected in the organization's marketing, right? It was very poor. It was established in their lack of understanding as far as performance of employees and in their customers. Do they feel satisfied? And so this led to the first strategic priority that they could uncover, a satisfaction survey of everybody. Board members, staff members, people we're serving. Let's create a little survey to understand how everybody is feeling served by the organization. Because we've got dedicated people, but they're disengaged. Are we not serving their needs, right? We've got staff that are quitting and going home. We've got neighbors who are stuck in their houses, right, needing repairs, and so on and so forth. So this created a chain of events that they use to actually implement the strategic plan. So just to give you a little bit of an understanding of how something like this might play out. Any questions or thoughts about these? It's okay. Take it in and drop your questions as we go along. So this is a really cool activity that you can do even without a facilitator. You can think of these 4 dimensions and how your story, and see how your story expands into the work you're doing. So let's shift gears and talk a little bit about a story of a co-op, right? No specific co-op. This is just something that happens, right? And I know we're not all co-ops. So there's a need, right? In a community, a group of people recognize, I'm dealing with this, you're dealing with this, and maybe it's childcare, right? So our community has no affordable childcare centers, right? It's kind of a bunch of private situation. And so everyone says there's a need. And so for a couple months, we start talking and everyone is in agreement. And we come to the idea that we can form a co-op, right? And so we said, all right, we're going to form this co-op. It's going to be great. And we finally find someone who knows a little bit about co-ops. And that person sits down and says, oh, you can't do that unless you do this, right? You need to make some money. You need to create these bylaws. You can't do that unless you do this. So you start changing a little bit. And then you go for capital, right? A lender or a donor. And there's a condition approval, right? If you do this, if you can get your sales, if you can do these things, you can get some money. So you grow and adapt. And then you open for business. And you've already made 2 pivots from the developer and the funder. And now the customers hit you with a reality check, right? The people who are supposed to access the service. You think it's great, but now they aren't signing up. And so you pivot again. And you get to the point where you decide to even outsource, right? Let's hire an expert. Now, all of these steps led them from our community had this problem to kind of how do we perform better to make this profit. And none of these steps are incorrect or wrong or anything like that. it's an experience that I see people have in our work in the broader sense of creating a business. And what we may have started out as a community approach, identifying the need and engaging a problem, turns into a different thing, right? And so I don't know who can relate to this story or who've seen this story, but it's out there, right? And so this is kind of based on this idea of the Peter principle, which is pretty harsh, but it says that people are promoted to their level of incompetence and stay there. So you have a good salesman. They're selling every month, they're beating all the records. So then we say, this person, we're gonna turn them into a manager. And now they have to deal with people and they don't like that. You know, they're not very good at that, but they were such a great salesman, they got promoted, right? And so now they're stuck there. And we see it in all types of ways, but it's kind of the idea of that, right? If you're a nonprofit, you go out and you start getting into the community and really addressing a problem, right? You created a free food fridge. You're just doing little things to address the solution. I mean, the problem that you see as a solution. And then you get a grant and they say, okay, can you do this for 1,000 people, right? And so the funder encourages you to do that. So you say, yeah, we can develop a program around that. And then, you know, the city calls you and say, hey, can you, you know, do these logistics? Right? Okay, we deliver the food to people, but yeah, we can plan logistics. And then there's a logistics helping that you are now because you got this $100,000 contract, and now things are falling apart. So it happens no matter what your context is, but the idea is that you're kind of not really growing up into who you're meant to be. You're essentially losing your way, and you're conforming to what existing hierarchy might expect of you, which does achieve rewards and receive recognition, but it leads to an identity crisis at some point. And the question is, you know, who am I? What is my work? And so a lot of the times we see this coming out of, and it's not always the case, but sometimes it's coming out of a split between your desire and your purpose, right? Getting what you want in that moment, which could be profit, or achieving the purpose, which is our community have some access to a service it needs. And so to help you identify how these two things start to change, you've got desire as goal-oriented, right? Usually tied to self-preservation, and it gets weaker over time, right? It might be a big opportunity, and over time, you know, that opportunity has dwindling returns. Whereas purpose, which is vision-oriented, right, might be a weak opportunity right now, but it strengthens over time and it benefits others. And so these two things are not, you know, it's not mutually exclusive, but sometimes they are opposing. And oftentimes when we go for those short-term goals over our long-term vision, we find ourselves not knowing who we are anymore. And so it's hard to tell your story from that angle. And so this is kind of an activity that can help reclaim your identity in that regard. So the first is this area here, and it's a matrix based on the idea of, you know, this is known to me and this is known to others, right? So in the first area, it's known to self and known to others, and we call that the open arena. Or in the second area, it's not known to self and it's known to others. So I don't know it, but other people can see it. That's your blind spot, right? And then we've got areas of our lives and activities that are not known to others, but it's known to me. That's your facade, right? And it's not pejorative, it's just what it is. It's how you feel inside as distinct from how you express yourself, what people know you for. And a lot of the time, this is our coping mechanism. This is how we dealt with the difficult situations in our formation years. And we just kept growing from that perspective. And of course, not known to yourself, not too known to others, that's the unknown area. That's what you don't know. And so I want you guys to take a minute or two to consider what these may be for you. Of course, you're not going to know the unknown, but write up the grid and consider especially blind spot areas, which it might be hard for you to know, but thinking about what those areas might be. Definitely get into some facade, and the open arena is really important. So think about this for yourself as a personal activity, but also for the organization you're working with. All right? And this is not necessarily something you have to share unless you're comfortable with. This is really just a reflection. So I'm gonna give you guys a minute to reflect on this, okay? A minute for yourself, a minute for the organization you're working with. All right. Any questions?
I have a question. Okay, so we're at a stage where, you know, we're making shifts where people are, it seems like sometimes the personal development goals are different than the business development goals, and having to spend time either merging them or delaying one or the other. Does that fit within this matrix of what you talked about?
So business development goals and development goals feeling opposing or distinct?
Feeling, I would say distinct. And so we're working to navigate it so it's not opposing, because the goal was to bring it together, you know, but you know, yeah.
So it's definitely possible to integrate both of them in for example, known to self, right? And known to others. Folks might think, you know, we're trying to recruit for members and members are going to build this thing up, but you know, we're really, and if we're articulated about it, we're really looking for funders, right? We're not really just looking just for members. And so how do we talk about those two things? Do we say we want members and funders? We want our members to be funders, you know, and it could be that you create messages for each of those two things, which is probably what you're doing. But what you don't want to do is not have that articulated, right? You don't want it to be down in the facade where we're trying to have a grassroots initiative and we're looking at all these large institutions who are going to come in and finance, and we're not telling everybody that. So getting clear.
Then the other piece is that, you know, we also have been in the situation where what we present is attractive to funders, but we don't always follow through because it doesn't empower the people. And I don't know that we say that either, but but I notice you know, there's a tendency to back off because we don't want to get wrapped up in a funding circle that is not aligned with, you know, what our mission is.
Yeah, and so that's good to know, because if you didn't know it, it might be a blind spot, and it might be the case that, you know, they're an organization that says we're gonna do some stuff on the soil, but there's all these kind of special events, you know, it's kind of networking. We're meeting all these.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That's where we stopped, you know, because we said, look, we got to have land, because we can't do we can't be who we say we are without our own land, because we've been bounced, you know, and you know, you just can't grow when you're bouncing.
Yeah. And so there's not an answer that someone else can give, but it's going to be the choice between becoming, meaning purpose as the flowering of who you are, right? Just taking those steps that may not be rewarding, that may not be result in recognition, versus getting these small goals. Now, land is a big goal, right? So it's not something you just necessarily get tomorrow. It's a process. But even accepting money as the proximate goal towards that ultimate goal, how do you do so? Are you doing so in ways that allow you to become and flower, or are you just kind of trimming the leaves and creating a pathway to move forward one step? So I think it is all about recognizing that awareness is key, and then being able to articulate that to the folks who you care about. because what would, go ahead.
No, what you just said, keep articulate to the people you care about. That was
Yeah.
key.
Yes, yes. Any other thoughts on this from anyone? All right. Well, ultimately, once you've done that for yourself and for the organization, the goal is, as I was trying to communicate just now, getting all that energy flowing into the open arena. We want to reduce the facade once we're aware of it, right? And we're not always aware of it until we take the time. We want to reduce the blind spot, right? By talking to folks and getting a sense of how they see us. That's how you reduce that, right? Because if you don't know it, someone else might see it, and somebody could have a misperception or some thwarted view, but you want to get a diversity of perspective as to how you're seeing it. And ultimately, you want to shift that to the open arena, and you want to get as much as possible known to you and known to the people you care about in all of your public expressions, anywhere you're telling your story. And so this is just a step that I always like to do if I ever feel lost, if I ever feel like, okay, where am I going? You know, who am I and where am I going? So this is something that you can continue to do over time. And I like the name Johari Window. Sounds like Johan, but I didn't come up with it. So, all right. So finding our way. And so identity is what we just talked about. Who am I? And there's various levels to that, right? I'm Johan. I'm a Caribbean immigrant. I'm Black. I'm a man. I'm a father. Who am I, right? And having that understanding as to the various dimensions of you and your story can lead you to understand, what did I inherit, right? Where am I coming from? Or in other words, what story was told to me and what stories will I tell, right? The way you are situated in a system might put you inheriting wealth or inheriting poverty. But what am I going to do with that story, right? We're all in the same system, but we're inheriting different things. And initiation, right? Where am I going? Who will help me to create a happy ending or a preferred future? And so as we're telling our stories, we're trying to bring it into the context of these three things, as far as what I'm trying to suggest to do. And, you know, this is just something I came up with a long time ago when trying to engage the idea of racial reconciliation. And how do I tell a new story for myself beyond the color codes? So I think this is something that could be helpful, these three steps, because then you can start to co-create a story with those who are going to help you to create a better future. And you're not going to perpetuate stories that were told to you that you assume were true by default. And this has relevance up and down your quote unquote value chain, right? From members who are coming in, right? What stories are they being told to the next generation after that? Employees to different funders and audiences. How are these stories consistent over time? And what are the sense of self of the people who are telling them? And so living your story, final words, to tell your story in a way that allows you to live it, you've got to believe it, right? How do we feel telling our stories? Do we believe it? Or are we telling it to get a reward? And we may have short-term goals that are appropriate to pursue, but does it take away from our flowering? Is it leading us away from becoming who we are trying to be? Do we tell our stories in a way that centers the audience we're speaking to? Do we allow others to claim the story? And finally, is the story about achieving something bigger than ourselves? Because that's what purpose is about. Achieving a higher common good, including others in our benefit, in our happy ending. So that's it for today. We can spend the next 8 minutes in questions if folks have them. Absolutely. Raising your hands or getting in there. Oh, hand clap. Appreciate you. So yep, feel free to come off mute if you have hearts. Appreciate all you guys. Drop it in the chat. Any questions that are personal or just general about things discussed, or if Carolyn, you have any points that I should engage based on commentary.
I have a few questions, or maybe you can give me some clarity. So I'm currently working for the farm school, but I also have some personal goals and ideas in mind for after my time here at the farm school. I want to move back to the Dominican Republic where I'm from, and I'm thinking I really want to also kind of have a similar project like here at the farm school, but it's very different because it's a very different context in my country. And yeah, I'm struggling with making merging having my story be something that is not just for me but for other people. But it's different. It's not like I need to reconnect indigenous people, because it's like a lot of us are just us. There's not like that separation of power like here, where it's a lot of just white people that are like in power. But there are a lot of people that have been disenfranchised also in the DR. So I don't know. I'm trying to think of like groups of people that I would like to, but I'm also don't want to go back with that mentality that like, yeah, have that white savior mentality when I'm going back. I just want to go back and have a place where people can also have a reconnection to land and also food.
Yeah, I hear you. And I'm in a similar situation in that I'm an immigrant and I've kind of found roots here in America. I'm half and half, 15 years in the Caribbean, 15 years in the States. And for me, I realized that I need to connect to people like me. People who've left want to go back, you know? It's not really me going in there and trying to start from their perspective, which I don't currently have fully, you know? I have a half perspective. I'm seeing the glass half full or half empty. I'm not seeing the full glass. But there are people like me who are out here coming from different places and trying to find home. And so you can do that here. You can leverage that to support efforts back home. But I would say similarly to who am I, right? I was born there, I came here, I'm in the midst of this new experience, but I'm craving home. And what did I inherit from that? I inherited a vision of two worlds, a vision of, you know, the corporate developed America, but the childhood of, you know, being on land. And who can I work with to help me tell a different story, a story where folks aren't leaving home and feel more connected to their ancestry and their indigeneity and their land. So to me, it kind of builds off like that, really getting a clear sense of who you are now and what that brings you, good and bad, and who similar to you or who's doing it already, who can help you tell that story in a way that creates a preferred future, right? So you really have to understand who you are and what problems come with that, because other people will be dealing with that too.
Thank you.
Anyone else has any thoughts on that particular issue? No problem. Any other questions?
I don't have a question, but really appreciating all of the folks who are sharing, and appreciating Michael for sharing. And just so much to think about, really keeping everything relational. I feel like sometimes I really struggle with how to tell any of the stories without it feeling like it's all about what we need versus like who we want to be in relationship with, and wanting to be able to connect all of those folks we want to be in relationship with, so that there's real depth there. And so just these ways into thinking about the process that center that purpose and relationship, so that the asks and the ways into different, like you were saying, our different audience members are all in authenticity. So just appreciating that. Thank you.
Gotcha.
So I have a
Yep.
question, a philosophical question about storytelling,
Mhm.
or a concern, one that I struggle with. I know that in, business marketing, you have to start with the problem and pain and all of that. But coming from the indigenous point of view and indigenous stories, where the beginning, if you know the beginning well, the end will not trouble you, because in the beginning it was good, and in the beginning it was whole, and in the beginning we did it right. So and that's part of what I bring to the table is, the promise that, we have done it right before, we can do it right again. So how do I fit that? So to me, that's a conflict. If I got to immerse people in the pain in order to get to where I'm going, that means they won't be able to hold the promise. Because they won't. They'll keep cycling back to the pain and then have to be pulled out, pain and pulled out. No, I want you to connect to the promise and pull the promise into this reality. So what are your suggestions about telling a story from that point of view? Or do you think it's possible?
Definitely possible. I think the framework that I introduced was about really distilling the elements. And I think you can rearrange it in a way that suits your goals and your way of speaking and being. I would say one thing that I remember having a conversation with some young men, there was a quote, and it was like, the best way to predict the future is to create it.
Right.
And then we flipped it around, right? Because I included understanding like what's now and what's then. And we said the best way to create the future is to predict it. And so speaking from victory is possible from that perspective. I thought we can define the future and walk towards that. We can start with the happy ending. So that's just the first thing that came to my mind. I think it is possible to tell stories invoking victory. And Carolyn, get in there.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is that sometimes the pain is the alienation from the source, right? So, we know that we used to know how to do this. We used to have this capacity. And, now because of diaspora, because of whatever things, we've become separated from that. And that's the pain. But the promise is that it was there, and also that we can return to it. But it doesn't have to be that we stay in the place of separation or rootlessness.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that helps. So I'm connecting all the dots and helping people with all the touchstones that obviously are needed to create momentum. All right.
Yeah, I would say those elements are just key elements that we should be aware of, but really honing in on the right problem sometimes is our problem. And as Carolyn said, maybe the problem isn't that, we're suffering. The problem is that we're disconnected from our greatness, and so that framing is different and important. And I think a lot of themes around liberation is about remembrance. It's about remembering what, wholeness is and moving towards that once again. So I completely agree. All right, well, I think that's time. I think folks can access me anytime they want to follow up with this by emailing me or give me a call, and we can chop it up philosophically, practically, technically, whatever it is that's relevant to the issue you're dealing with. So appreciate your time, and just want to invite you guys to keep telling your stories. Do not hold them inside, and someone else will embrace them.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, everybody.